The story begins on a snowy battlefield where a man stands over a mountain of fallen foes. He then turns around and finds a black-haired young man he calls Ash, looking quite surprised. The older man then questions why the other is there, as he was supposed to be on a subjugation mission. With a wounded face and a serious look, the dark-haired young man simply replies that he came to take him down. Hearing the threat, the blonde man keeps his expression calm and doesn't seem to care about the situation at all. The young man then accuses the older man of planning to use everyone and then discard them when they were no longer useful. His eyes burn with anger as he calls him father, confirming the two are related. However, the older man coldly replies that this is the purpose of someone, Quingless, and calls him a foolish son. And so we discover the name of our protagonist, Aster A. Elmheim, a young man determined to change his destiny. Next, we see the crest of House Elmheim, a noble family known for its immense power. As the greatest martial house on the continent, they have sworn to protect the royal family, and their leader is Lord Roderick. He is the sole possessor of the 7 wings in the kingdom and once saved young Aster from a blizzard on a whim. To repay this debt, the boy then did everything his father asked without ever questioning his orders. However, his life was not easy, and he was always looked down upon, as we see in his memory with a broken wooden sword. The other boys constantly humiliated him, telling him not to get cocky just for being there. The wing crest on his back was proof of magical power, but he was the only one in the house unable to use magic. Because of this, his own brothers cruelly nicknamed him Wingless to put him down. Despite all the scorn, the boy never gave up and continued to train tirelessly with his sword. The young man pushed himself to the limit, doing push-ups in the rain and dedicating himself to becoming stronger than everyone. He did all of this because he believed that one day, all his devotion would finally be rewarded. Going back to the past, we see the protagonist in a snowy forest with his companions. Suddenly, the young man hides behind a tree when he notices something strange approaching. Then he is shocked to see that his group has been surrounded and wonders if it's an ambush. Returning to the present, the boy questions his father about his loyalty being betrayed in such a way, but the Lord scorns him, saying that a tool shouldn't have expectations, and that his role is over. The young man's expression fills with hatred and resentment upon hearing his father's cruel words. With that, he charges forward with his sword, ready to attack the man who betrayed him without a second thought. The young man yells that he was a fool for believing in someone like him all this time. At that moment, he unleashes a powerful blow, calling himself a pathetic idiot for his naivety. However, the Lord is barely fazed by the attack and only receives a small cut on his face. Suddenly, 2 men appear and restrain the protagonist with chains of magical energy. They are his brothers, who attack him without mercy with their red, glowing swords. The black-haired young man cries out in pain as he is immobilized and wounded by the cowardly attacks. One of the brothers mocks him on the ground, saying that a wingless person will always be wingless. The 3 stand before the defeated young man, while one of them says that groveling suits him. Lying in the snow, he asks why his father took him in, if he planned to discard him in the end. The Lord then kneels and tells the boy not to delude himself, as he was never of any use. He then grabs the young man's hair, forcing him to look up with a scornful gaze. The man reveals that he only needed the power of the 7 wings that dwelled within the boy. With a face full of surprise, the protagonist doesn't understand what the 7 wings are. The Lord then reveals that the boy's mother was very useful for his dark and selfish plans. He explains that she carried the seed that would serve his purposes to obtain more power. Desperate, the young man reaches out his hand in the snow, trying to stop him from leaving, but to no avail. Filled with hatred, he screams in his thoughts, demanding that Roderick answer his questions. But the only thing the boy feels is the cold snow touching his nearly frozen hand. With a lost and hopeless gaze, he wonders if this is the end of his journey. At that, he questions the purpose of his life and what all his suffering was for. Suddenly, everything turns white and warm, and he wonders if he's in the afterlife upon seeing snow. He is in someone's arms, looking confused and not understanding the situation at all. With wide eyes, the boy realizes this is not a dream, but reality. The little one wonders where he is as he continues to lie in the cold, unprotected snow. Then he looks at his small body and realizes that something is very strange about him. He lifts his little hand and questions if that body really belongs to him. The boy then understands that it's not just a small body, but the body of a baby. Looking at the woman holding him, he notices that she is lifeless in his arms. Suddenly, he hears voices and sees a golden glint in someone's eyes giving orders. Some men on horseback are desperately searching for the woman in the middle of the blizzard. The group's leader orders them to retrieve the baby she supposedly took for Roderick. Upon hearing the name, the baby is shocked and starts connecting the dots of what is happening. He understands that Roderick was looking for a baby, and that he is that baby. He questions if that baby floating in the air is really him. The boy remembers being found in a blizzard and understands that he has gone back to the past. Golden lights shine around him as his perception of reality completely changes. Finding it all ridiculous, he decides he needs to confirm the situation later. The little one knows that if he stays there, he will end up in the Duke's hands again. With determination, he begins to crawl away from the lifeless woman. A golden energy envelopes him, and he thinks that he needs to escape as quickly as possible. His small hand glows brightly as he pushes himself through the icy snow. Suddenly, he's out of breath and grunts in frustration for not being able to breathe properly. The effort makes his limbs feel like they're on fire, and he leaves a trail in the snow. Despite a life of groveling, the boy vows to himself that he will survive. An image of his tragic future appears in his mind, with his hand extended towards Roderick. With a look of pure rage, the little one vows that he will get his revenge on Roderick. Even as just a baby, he continues to crawl through the vast, cold whiteness. Exhausted, the boy finally passes out upon finding someone's feet in his path. A little white-haired girl calls out to her father upon finding the baby lying on the ground. Then a gray-haired man appears. He is the Viscount of House Highfried. He picks up the boy and wonders what a baby would be doing in a place like that. Cradled in the man's arms, the little one seems to finally find some peace. The Viscount's eyes widen in surprise, as he never expected to find a child there. Holding the little one in his arms, the Viscount is intrigued and wonders who this child could be. He then notices the long trail in the snow and is shocked by the distance the baby traveled alone. Meanwhile, the little boy just sleeps peacefully with a very serene expression on his face. In a dark place, the boy wonders where is as he sees the image of another child. At that, the red-haired baby seems to come to welcome him amidst several golden feathers in the air. Suddenly, he wakes up startled in a crib, thinking about not using something he saw in his dream. Then the little one sees 4 children staring at him, and one of them tells him not to be so naughty. Completely confused, the boy doesn't understand the situation at all, as he is surrounded by the other children. One of the girls holds him, but the black-haired boy struggles, trying to get free. With a leap, he manages to escape from her arms, leaving the other children quite surprised. Immediately, the boy starts crawling away with a desperate look on his face. One of the little girls is shocked by the little one's behavior and yells for him to stop, but he doesn't listen and continues his escape, wondering why he's being chased. Desperate, the protagonist extends his hand, and a golden energy begins to emanate from his body. His eyes glow intensely with the same golden color as his newly awakened magical aura. Suddenly, he starts to float and is shocked to realize that this is real magic. Surprised by his own power, the boy continues to float, not understanding what is happening. Then the magic fails, and he begins to fall at high speed with no control over the situation. With a face full of panic, the little one braces for impact as he continues his fall. Fortunately, the Viscount appears and catches him, finding the boy very mysterious. The protagonist's eyes widen in surprise as he recognizes the man who saved him. He then remembers that this is Highfried, the Viscount of Lodrick's domain, his father's land. Looking at the mansion, the boy wonders if this is another house of the Elmheim family. Then we see a portrait of Highfried Mu Elmheim, the head of the Viscount's family and a branch of the main house. He and his brother Lodrick were known as the Two Wings, and together they protected the royal family. But the boy remembers that the Viscount met his end in a civil war, along with his entire family. With this information, he finally confirms that he has truly gone back in time, and this is his second chance. However, he despairs at the thought that he fled the Duke's house, only to be caught by his brother. A woman holds him and wonders if the boy's magic went out of control and made him fly through the air. She then smiles gently at the little one, seeming happy to finally have him around. With a warm hug, the woman calms him down, saying he doesn't need to be afraid of anything anymore. The boy is speechless at the kind gesture of the woman, who continues to treat him with great love. Meanwhile, the Viscount observes the two with a calm and thoughtful expression on his face. At that, the older man extends his hand and states that this child possesses tremendous power. To prove his point, he lifts the baby's shirt, revealing a crest as proof of his words. Through the mirror's reflection, we see the man and woman shocked as they recognize the symbol of the 7 wings. The boy becomes desperate upon seeing the mark on his body and wonders why it is there. His eyes glow an intense gold as shock completely takes over his mind. He then remembers Roderick's words, who said he needed the power of the 7 wings that he possessed. A memory of his father holding him in a cold and calculating way flashes through his mind at that moment. The boy finally understands that he was taken in only to have his 7 wings taken in the future. Angrily, the boy questions how Roderick dares to call him wingless after taking his own. The woman is confused by the sudden change in the little one's expression in her arms. The woman then asks the Viscount what he intends to do with the child in her arms. Hearing the question, the little one thinks the situation is bad and he needs to act quickly. He knows his power cannot fall into the hands of the Elmheim family, as he needs it for his revenge. To the boy's surprise, the older man simply says that they will adopt him. This unexpected decision leaves the protagonist completely speechless and without any reaction. With a gentle gesture, the Viscount reaches out to pat the boy's head. Then he says that the boy is still a fledgling who cannot fly on his own and needs help. The older man promises to take care of him and assume responsibility until the day he can fly. The little one's eyes widen upon hearing the man's kind and affectionate words. Suddenly, one of the little girls falls to the floor after hearing the conversation from behind the room's door. The Viscount realizes that all the children were eavesdropping on the conversation the whole time. One of them then admits that they were worried about the new baby in the house. Gathered as a family, the children approach their mother, who is holding the newest family member. The woman smiles at the little one, while another of her daughters approaches, curious to see him. With a calm smile, the new mother looks at the baby in her arms with much love and affection. At that, she lifts him up and calls him Aster, the name of a new star that was born in their family. Then 10 years pass, and we see the grand mansion of the Viscount's family on a sunny day. Lord Hyfred, now older, is greeted by one of his subordinates at the entrance of his home. In the reflection of a picture frame, we see a young man cleaning the glass with a cloth in his hand. Next, a grown-up and confident Aster steps out of a carriage with his sword at his waist. The young man helps a red-haired young woman out of the carriage, calling her sister Alphen. The young woman thanks him for the kind gesture, and we remember she was one of the babies who welcomed him. The two walk together with serious expressions, and he seems very focused on his goal. They are on their way to the Sword Dance Assembly, a very important event for the nobles. This annual event is organized by a ducal family and brings together all the noble martial arts houses. It's a place where each family showcases its strength and also tests its best swordsmen in combat. The two siblings then join a crowd of other young nobles awaiting the start of the event. People begin to gossip about the Viscount's family and the adopted boy of unknown origin. With malicious eyes, they wonder how much the Viscount's family plans to tarnish the Elmheim name. One of the nobles then points to the protagonist's back, identifying him as the adopted boy. His sister notices the stares and tells the young man not to worry about the malicious comments. With a clenched fist, she states that in this place, the weak are always crushed without any mercy. The two stand side by side with determined looks, ready for whatever comes their way. Their father then explains that this is the Viscount family's current, standing among the nobles. The Viscount continues, saying he wanted to show this harsh reality to his adopted son. With a serious look, the older man then asks if the young man is disappointed with the situation, but with a confident smile and shining eyes, the young man says he doesn't care about their coldness. The boy's father laughs, relieved by his son's answer, looking quite proud of him. In his past life, Aster's social debut was marked by a humiliating defeat in an arena. That place held bitter memories, but now with his 7 wings back, everything would be different. With his golden eyes shining brightly, he vows that this time he won't be humiliated by anyone. Then, the 3 of them walk towards the grand hall of the event, ready for what's to come. From one of the windows, 2 young nobles watch the arrival of the Viscount's family with disdainful looks. The black-haired young man feels the malicious stares but doesn't let them bother him. With firm steps, they continue on their way into the hall, ready to make their debut. With a confident smile, he tells himself that he will have a glorious social debut this time. In an era where knights reigned, strength was the most important thing for nobles. At that, we see a light-haired young man fighting with his sword during one of the event's duels. For nobles, power was measured by their mastery with the sword and their skill in combat. The fights in the arena were considered the pinnacle of swordsmanship and a test for the best warriors. Majesty in combat was a noble's way of showing their renown and their family's power. As the 2 fight in the arena, the crowd watches every move with great attention. Suddenly, the 2 swordsmen charge at each other in a swift and decisive attack, but the absolute symbol of power and majesty was the medal, something that few truly possessed. With a precise blow, the light-haired young man manages to disarm and defeat his opponent in the arena. The red-haired young man is in shock after being defeated so humiliatingly in front of everyone. The victor then raises his sword, displaying the symbol that represented strength and majesty. The shining mark on his hand was the medal, proof of his power and honor as a knight. Watching from a box, the Viscount's family comments that the place remains as oppressive as ever. One of the girls then says that now she understands why her other sisters didn't want to come to the festival. The protagonist remembers his past life and the bullies who humiliated him in that place. The memory of his crushing defeat at that same event comes rushing back to his mind. His sister notices the change in his expression and calls his name, looking worried about him. She then asks if the young man is nervous because it's his first sword dance festival, but he denies it and says he doesn't feel nostalgia, but rather finds it all detestable. The red-haired girl is completely confused by her brother's unexpected response. The Viscount then says he needs to go to a meeting and asks his son to look after his sister. The girl complains, saying she's older, but the young man teases her, saying she's clumsy. The older man then advises the young man to use the time to make new connections with others. But before leaving, he warns him to make sure no one finds out about the 7 wings. After his father leaves, the boy thinks that hiding his power will be easier said than done. Suddenly, he feels the hostile stares of all the other nobles in the hall directed at him. With a sigh, the protagonist thinks about how difficult it is to socialize in such a hostile atmosphere. Despite the hostility, a look of determination appears in his bright, golden eyes. His sister sees him walking away and asks where he's going in such a hurry. Confidently, the young man just replies that he's going to make some friends around here. He then approaches a group of young nobles who are relaxing on a sofa in the hall. One of the red-haired boys notices him and rudely asks who the heck he is. Unfazed, the protagonist introduces himself and calls him Brother Dallas in a very calm tone. He then reveals his full name as Aster F. Elheim and says he is his younger brother. The red-haired boy is surprised, and the young man explains that he saw him from afar and came to say hi. Another noble then explains to Dallas that this is the boy adopted by the Viscount's family. With a hateful look, Dallas says that's why the other has the audacity to use the F in his name. The protagonist then remembers that Dallas and Brian are the ones who betrayed him in his past life. With this memory, he finds it pathetic that he once found the 2 of them intimidating. Now, in his eyes, they just look like children playing dress up on a brightly lit stage. His sister then calls his name, trying to pull him out of his dark and heavy thoughts. She then pulls him by the arm and tells them to leave, as he had already said his hello. Suddenly, the red-haired boy calls her by name, and she tenses up at being noticed by him. With a mocking smile, he asks if the girl is still hiding behind her father. He then invites her to join them, saying it's an order from the family's main house. But the young woman refuses and states that there is no master-servant relationship between the families. The protagonist stops her from leaving by holding her arm and asking her to wait a moment. With a firm hand on her wrist, he says that he's not finished talking with the others there. The black-haired young man then turns to the group with a serious and determined expression on his face. With a wicked look, the redhead asks if the boy knows something they don't. At that, he insults the girl's father, saying he was a knight who couldn't even protect the king. The noble continues, saying the man took the blame and had his arm removed by his own brother. He then finishes by saying he's glad he doesn't have a loser's blood in his veins. Angrily, the red-haired young woman yells at him to take back what he said about her father right now. Without a second thought, she throws her drink in his face and says she won't allow the insult. The young man insults her and says her father must be very disappointed to have a daughter like her. With a hateful look, he warns her that this isn't a ballroom and she should behave herself. The noble humiliates her and tells her to wear rags next time so she won't mind getting wet. Suddenly, the protagonist approaches and says he was worried before arriving at the venue. He then reveals that he was afraid he wouldn't feel any anger even after seeing their faces again. With a determined look, he then coldly grabs a bottle from one of the nobles beside him. He looks at his sister and says that it's actually a relief to be there again to face them. At that, the young man tosses the bottle into the air and gets Dallas's attention with a provocative tone. The red-haired noble barely has time to react as the bottle falls quickly towards him. But with a swift move, he cuts the bottle in mid-air and says it's good to see them again. The noble is completely soaked with the drink and shocked by the young man's actions. With his sword in hand, he faces his adopted brother while the other desperately calls out to him. The young man then tastes the drink on his finger and realizes it was just grape juice. With a wicked smile, he says the drink is a perfect match for a spoiled noble like him. We go back 3 years in the past, where a voice asks the young man to hold on during a fight. One of his sisters cries desperately and asks if he's trying to hurt the others. The golden energy seems to go out of control and scares the little girls who are with him at that moment. The power of the 7 wings explodes dangerously, and he never imagined it would be so strong. The Viscount looks very concerned and wonders if that strength can truly be controlled. He then questions if the boy, and he himself, will be able to master that immense and dangerous power. Returning to the present, a guard runs into the Viscount's meeting room with bad news. The older man then asks what happened. As they are in the middle of a conference, the guard reveals that the children of the main family and the Elmheim branch are in a duel right now. Upon hearing the news, the 2 family leaders have very serious and tense expressions. Without a second thought, the Viscount gets up and rushes out of the room to see what happened. His daughter sees him and asks what happened that was so serious for him to be in such a hurry. One of the nobles from the main family smiles upon seeing the fight brewing between the young men. He then comments that a fight between brothers of the Elmheim house isn't something you see every day. The Duke and the Viscount observe the scene, and one of them thinks that depending on the outcome of the fight, other nobles also watch the situation with expressions of concern and curiosity on their faces. The Duke smiles wickedly and thinks that this festival could become quite chaotic soon. Hungrily, Dallas calls him a fool for picking a fight with the Duke's house like that. He then shows his 4-wing crest, proving that he's on a completely different level. With a scornful look, the redhead then demands that the protagonist show his own wing crest. The redhead then mocks the protagonist, asking if he's ashamed to show his crest. With a smug smile, the boy says that showing off with a simple pattern is embarrassing. Dallas is furious with the provocation and the audacity of the boy who challenges him without any fear. The young man then proposes that if he wins, Dallas will have to apologize to his sister, The redhead accepts the challenge, but says that if he wins, the other will become his dog forever. Without wasting time, Dallas charges with his sword, and the two begin an intense battle in the hall. The blades clash with force, and the protagonist manages to block the attack without much difficulty. The black-haired young man stands firm and focused as he holds his sword with great strength. Then Dallas uses the power of the four-wing crest to strengthen his next blow with magic. A red aura envelopes his blade, and he unleashes a powerful attack against his opponent. Seeing the scene from afar, his sister screams his name, looking very worried about the outcome. Meanwhile, the Duke watches the fight with a smile and thinks that his son's swordsmanship is still immature, but he knows that the crest's magical power compensates for the lack of skill with the sword. He explains that the magic of one wing is like the flame of a small, very weak candle. Meanwhile, the magic contained in four wings is like an explosion of immense and destructive power. With a wicked smile, the redhead asks the boy where all his previous courage went. He then taunts him, asking if he didn't want to make him apologize for his words. Angrily, Dallas demands that the protagonist show his power and stop hiding on the defensive. The redhead then prepares a final blow with both hands to end the fight once and for all. One of the nobles smiles with satisfaction and says the match is already decided with that attack. A golden aura envelopes the protagonist's sword as he prepares for the final counterattack. With a swift move, he blocks Dallas's blow, and the two energies clash with force. The redhead is completely shocked, as he didn't expect his attack to be stopped so easily. With a confident smile, the black-haired young man tells the other that he talks too much. He then counterattacks with a kick and sends the noble flying with a single, precise blow. The young man stands in a firm posture, his golden aura shining intensely around him. He thinks that he waited 10 years to learn magic in the Viscount's house, just to get revenge. His eyes shine with determination as he prepares to continue the fight against Dallas. Without hesitation, the young man advances with a series of quick and powerful blows against his opponent. The redhead is unable to defend himself and ends up on his knees, completely overwhelmed. Another brother watches the scene, shocked, not believing that Dallas is being pushed back like that. At that, a green and yellow energy pushes the noble back with overwhelming force. Desperate, he yells that he is a four-wing and cannot be defeated by someone like Aster. But the protagonist faces him with a cold stare, not caring about the other's power. He then unleashes another powerful blow that rushes towards the red-haired noble. The other nobles are surprised and wonder if the boy is really going to win the fight like that. Everyone is shocked and comments that there are still monsters like him in the Elheim family. With a focused look, the young man continues his attack without giving the other a chance to breathe. The Viscount watches the scene worriedly beside his daughter and says the situation is bad. With a face full of anger, Dallas tries to resist his opponent's overwhelming power. At that, a memory of the Viscount being gravely wounded by his brother flashes through the boy's mind. The man was laughing maniacally while his relative fell defeated, unable to do anything. With eyes glowing with rage, the protagonist releases an even more powerful golden aura. Desperate, Dallas screams for him to stop, but the young man's fury seems to have gone out of control. Seeing the scene, his family in the box shouts his name, trying to stop him from going too far. A large explosion of energy throws the red-haired noble back with great force. The Duke just watches the scene with his arms crossed, seeming not to care about his son. The protagonist then stops his attack and thrusts his sword into the ground right in front of his opponent. Lying on the ground, Dallas is terrified, and the young man tells him to come in rags next time. With a cold and superior look, the young man calls him cousin, showing all his contempt for him. He then turns and looks at his family in the box, who are watching him with astonishment. The young man declares that he is no longer the wingless Ash, showing that his old weakness is gone. With a confident smile, he thinks that realizing this has finally cleared his mind completely. Suddenly, the young man's eyes glow with a reddish hue as he senses a malevolent presence. He looks to the top of the stairs and sees a sinister figure with a dark, red aura. The protagonist is in shock as he realizes who the owner of that overwhelming and malevolent power is. The man stares down at the boy with a look of pure malice and contempt on his face. With a cold sweat on his face, the young man can't believe he's seeing his former father there in front of him. The nobles can't believe that the Viscount's youngest son defeated the main family's third son, but the Lord's arrival puts everyone in a bad situation, as he won't stay quiet about the humiliation. The protagonist feels the intimidating presence and turns to face the approaching man. Lying on the ground, Dallas laughs maniacally upon seeing that his father has finally arrived to save him. The young man then comes face to face with the leader of the Elheim family, the powerful Lord Roderick. The older man stares at him with a serious and furious look, seeming not at all happy with the situation. With a face full of hatred, the young man remembers the name of the one who betrayed him in his past life. The redhead then crawls to his father and grabs his leg, desperately asking for help. With tears in his eyes, Dallas calls him father, hoping he will defend him from the protagonist. He then points at the young man and accuses him of being the bastard who dared to challenge the family. The noble then begs his father to use his power and put the young man in his place. Suddenly, the Lord crushes his own son's hand on the floor with brutal and cold force. Dallas screams in pain and is shocked by the unexpected action of his father, who punished him without mercy. The other nobles are horrified by the scene and don't understand the man's cruelty towards his son. Even Dallas's brother is speechless upon seeing the redhead's hand being crushed like that. The Lord then humiliates him, asking why he's crying after dragging the family's name through the mud. Seeing the scene, the Viscount yells for his brother to stop the cruelty and not harm the boy. But he ignores him and tells the redhead that he has no right to hold a sword. A tense silence fills the hall as everyone watches the scene, shocked and speechless. The two brothers then face each other with looks full of hatred, ready for a direct confrontation. The black-haired young man steps forward and points his sword at the Lord, questioning him. He then says that his cousin has not yet apologized to Sister Alphen as promised. With a defiant look, the young man asks his uncle to wait on the punishment until after the apology. The older man scorns him and asks if he thinks he's an Elmheim just for being an orphan. But the boy replies that he is the Viscount's son and learned the pride of a knight from him. The Lord doesn't seem to care about the answer and just looks at his family in the box. He then accuses the young man of tarnishing the main family's reputation with his attitude. The Duke observes the scene and understands that the situation is much more serious than it seems. Another noble comments that this can't be resolved as a simple children's squabble. A light-haired young man smiles wickedly, seeming to enjoy all the chaos. One of the men then remembers that the boy's father gave an arm as the price for his disloyalty. The Lord then questions the young man about what he is prepared to sacrifice for his audacity. With all due respect, the young man prepares to give his answer without any fear in his eyes. He says that it wasn't a squabble, but a duel to answer insults with his sword. The older man gets angry upon hearing the boy's defiant words. The young man then uses the Lord's own words against him and says he won't give up anything. Seeing the scene, Alphen becomes very worried about her brother, who faces their uncle without backing down. The light-haired noble finds it amusing and comments that the boy is only 10 years old. The Lord's eye twitches with anger at the audacity of the young man before him. He then understands the situation and draws his sword, ready for a confrontation with the boy. He then orders the young man to take his fighting stance for the duel. The protagonist is shocked, as he didn't expect to be challenged by the Lord. Suddenly, the older man charges forward with absurd speed towards him. The Lord's blow shatters the floor, creating a huge crater with the impact. His sister watches the scene, terrified and unable to do anything to help. Desperate, the Viscount shouts his brother's name to try to stop him. At that, the boy's adoptive father jumps in to block the Lord's attack. The two swords clash with tremendous force in the middle of the hall. The two brothers then begin an intense and spark-filled battle. After the clash, the Viscount runs to see if his son is okay. Suddenly, a pillar of ice erupts from the floor, separating the two sides. The older man is confused and doesn't understand what just happened. Wounded, The protagonist gets up with difficulty but remains standing. His face is injured, but his eyes burn with pure determination. The Lord just watches the scene from afar with a look of contempt. He then turns and starts to walk out of the main hall. The Viscount rushes and catches the young man before he collapses to the floor, exhausted. The older man calls his name, looking very concerned. With an injured face, the young man says he protected his sister and the promise. Moved, the Viscount praises him, saying he was magnificent in the fight. Roderick then turns and goes up the stairs without another word, with his son following right behind. Up there, one of the nobles comments that Duke resorted to a very childish move to resolve the situation. He says that if he let the boy win, the family's reputation would be in tatters, so it was a fair deal. Even facing the great lord, the young man stood firm and became a rising star there. The noble admits he was on the edge of his seat, afraid that House Elmheim would end up splitting in two. Then an older man says that an era of turmoil is approaching, with a storm that could divide the world. Meanwhile, the Viscount holds the wounded boy, and his sister runs desperately to help him in the hall. Sometime later, on a sunny day, we see several men training outside the mansion. Some knights watch the training with surprised expressions on their faces, looking impressed. At that, the protagonist trains with a wooden sword and manages to defeat his opponent without difficulty. One of the knights watching the fight is shocked by the young man's skill and says he's impressive. The black-haired young man remains focused on the training, and the man calls him young Master Aster. Another knight comments that he has a lot of skill and is frightening for being only 10 years old. He then continues, saying that the young man crushed Lord Roderick's third son during the event. His friend smiles and says that this is a refreshing story because the main family has been oppressing them for a long time. While training, the young man thinks that he showed his strength and presence enough at the sword dance assembly. He believes this will silence the voices that mock the Viscount's house and call them a disgrace. But the young man knows that his real target is still the Elmheim family itself and his former father. That's why he wanted to test how far his power could go in that duel against Dallas in the hall. A memory of the fight against the Lord comes to his mind as he continues his intense training. With a determined look, the protagonist knows that at his current level, he cannot defeat Roderick. He thinks that the wing crest is just a measure of latent magical power, and he can't use all 7 yet. The boy knows that being born with the power is useless if he can't use it, calling it wasted potential. With a swift move, the young man continues his training and charges at his opponent with the sword. His eyes glow with an intense gold as he concentrates fully on the fight against the knight. With a precise blow, the protagonist breaks the man's sword and yells, asking who's next. All the other knights are already on the ground, completely defeated by the young man. Suddenly, a voice questions if he's up to no good again, while watching the scene from afar. Then his sister Alphen appears and says he has no limits, but that their father is calling for him. The young man agrees and starts walking towards her, passing by the fallen knights on the ground. At that, the young man notices the clothes the girl is wearing and seems quite surprised by her choice. The young woman then turns to him and asks what's wrong with a curious expression on her face. He comments that it's a rare sight and asks if she didn't hate wearing that type of clothing before. But the young woman replies that everything needs balance and that he inspired her not to stay as she was. The protagonist is a bit confused by his sister's answer and doesn't understand what she meant. With a smile, she takes his training sword and says that when she gets back, he will spend a lot of time with her. The young man smiles at the girl's attitude, seeming happy with his older sister's determination. He then jokes and asks her to go easy on him in their next training session together. Sometime later, the boy knocks on the door of his adoptive father's office to answer the call. Excusing himself, he enters the room and finds the Viscount sitting at his desk, looking very serious. The young man then asks what the man needs, and he just tells the boy to sit down for a talk. Sitting on the sofa, the protagonist awaits his father's words with a calm expression on his face. The older man begins by saying that 10 years have passed since they welcomed him into the family. He continues and says he thought about waiting until the boy was a little older for this. At that, the Viscount places a ring on the table, and the boy asks what it is, shocked. The man then reveals that the ring is proof of the next head of the Viscount's house. With a serious look, he says he wants Aster to succeed him, leaving the young man with shining eyes. The Viscount explains that their house is in a very delicate position, and the young man already knows this. He continues, saying that even though they are a branch of the Elman family, they have their own territory to protect. With a serious look, the man says they can't leave the seat of the next head vacant forever. The young man then asks if his sisters agree with this sudden decision from their father. The older man replies that he will tell everyone at the Night Academy where he will find his sisters. The young man remembers his other sisters, Malfa and Kudo, and questions if they will also know the news. In his thoughts, the boy smiles and says they wouldn't be happy about it, especially Kudo. The adoptive father then explains that she dislikes him just for being born a boy with 7 wings. With that, the protagonist stands up and refuses the offer to become the next head of the family. He says he can't control his magic and almost hurt his own sister for being too immature. The black-haired young man states that nothing can convince an angry sister and that he's not ready. The older man just observes his son's attitude with a calm and thoughtful expression on his face. He then comments that the young man always made him doubt if he was really just an ordinary child. With a smile, the Viscount says he thought of the ring as a reward for the assembly and opens a box. But he continues and says that it seems the boy will prefer what's inside that box. The boy's eyes widen in surprise upon seeing the box's contents, and he wonders what it is. The older man then reveals that it is the magic sword Graham, a treasure of his family. This is the devouring magic blade, the only weapon capable of controlling the power of the 7 wings. The Viscount then takes the young man to a forest and says that this place should work for what he plans. The young man asks why they didn't go to the training hall, and the older man says it's a precaution. He then remembers that his adopted son has a habit of breaking things during his training. The man explains that the sword Graham is a famous blade passed down only to the eldest son of the family. With an intense glow, the sword seems to be activated in the older man's hands with immense power. The protagonist is completely shocked upon seeing the scene, not understanding what is happening. The boy then notices that the weapon has no blade and wonders if it's really a sword. But his adoptive father infuses it with magical power, and a blade of red energy emerges from the hilt. He then explains that the weapon is a blade of potential, completed by the power of its wielder. At that, a powerful attack of red energy surges forward, destroying everything in its path in the forest. The blow is so strong that it creates a vortex of air and dust, showing the immense power of the magic sword. The man warns that with mediocre power, the user can be drained by the blade, and that it has a history. With a serious look, he then offers the sword to the young man and asks if he wants to try using it. Without thinking, the young man grabs the sword's hilt with both hands, ready to test his own power. A golden aura envelopes him as he concentrates his mana into the weapon to create his own blade. The golden energy then explodes with immense force, and the boy seems to struggle to control it. He then realizes that his mana is flowing into the sword on its own, without his command. Suddenly, a huge beam of light shoots up into the sky, and one of the knights in the courtyard notices the flash. One of them asks if a comet fell, but his friend says it was the opposite, and something flew into the sky. His sister also observes the scene, and one of the men asks the other what he means by that. His sister then looks at the sky and says that it is definitely the protagonist's work. At that, the young man holds the sword with a smile and says that it is extraordinary, but his adoptive father corrects him, saying that it's not the sword that is extraordinary. He then points to the sky and states that the boy's power is what's impressive. The man explains that there has never been anyone with the 7 wings crest in the entire lineage. He believes that when the young man masters his power, he will surpass even Lord Roderick. At that, the Viscount thinks that his adopted son will be stronger than both him and his brother. However, he warns that such great power always ends up generating a lot of conflict. The man continues and says that If they find out the boy has 7 wings, it will be a problem. He then explains that everyone would be envious or even resentful of the young man. He warns that some will exploit him and others will try to eliminate him for being a threat, so that the young man doesn't regret being weak. The man extends his hand to him. With a serious look, he asks the young man to get strong while he can still train. The protagonist shakes his hand and vows that he will no longer live a miserable life. With determination, he thanks his father and promises to master the 7 wings and the sword. 3 days pass, and the Viscount's family welcomes someone home with open arms. Then 2 young women arrive, and the red-haired one dramatically announces her return. With an exaggerated pose, the girl seems very happy to finally be back. She then opens her arms and asks for a reunion hug from her younger sisters. But the girls run to hug the white-haired woman, calling her sister Malfa. The red-haired young woman is left with her arms open and asks why no one is hugging her. One of the little ones then complains that her sister always messes up their hair carelessly. Embarrassed, the redhead denies everything and says she would never do such a thing to her sisters. Suddenly, she turns and finds Alphen standing near the stairs, watching the scene. Without a second thought, Kudo runs and gives the other girl a very tight hug. The pink-haired girl complains as her sister squeezes her very tightly without letting go. Seeing the scene, the white-haired young woman asks her father where Brother Aster is. The Viscount then begins to answer his daughter's question with a calm smile. With a serious look, Kudo turns upon hearing the mention of her adopted brother's name. Meanwhile, the young man is training and unleashes an explosion of red energy in the forest. The protagonist then dodges his own power, which seems to be out of control. Panting and in a cold sweat, he realizes he still can't master the magic sword. He thinks he can create the blade, but he's at his limit, just keeping it stable. Amidst the destruction, the young man wonders what he must do to be like his father. Suddenly, a voice says he's outdone himself, and Kudo appears, walking towards him. The young man asks if she's back already, and the redhead complains that he didn't even come to welcome her home. With a mocking smile, the girl calls him cold for not coming to meet her. She then accuses him of thinking he's special, and says she heard about the sword assembly. But the young man replies that the same goes for her and her missions as a knight apprentice. He finishes by saying that she was the only one to receive the honorary Knight Medal of the Year. The red-haired girl says that if she couldn't even achieve that, she could never succeed her father. She then questions if he refused the offer of successor because of her. The young man thinks that his father caused trouble and says that wasn't his intention. He just explains that he didn't feel worthy of taking on such a responsibility yet. The redhead then turns and starts walking away, talking about her father and brother. She accuses him of being mean for knowing what her dream is and still acting that way. The black-haired young man is completely confused by his sister's reaction. Suddenly, the girl attacks with her sword, releasing a slash of energy in his direction. The attack cuts through the air and rushes forward, destroying a tree in its path. The young man is startled and narrowly dodges as the tree trunk explodes. Angrily, he asks why she suddenly attacked him like that, without warning. The redhead just replies that since it's been a while, she was going to test his skills. With a confident smile, the girl warns that next time she'll attack with everything she's got. The protagonist tries to argue, saying his sword is still incomplete, but she questions if he would give the same excuse to an enemy on the battlefield. The black-haired young man is surprised by the question and wonders about the enemy. She says a knight must always be ready, and that if he hesitates, she will crush him. The girl charges again, and the young man thinks she must be kidding him. He thinks he's already at his limit, just trying to control his unstable magical power. But he understands he has no choice and releases his energy if his sister is serious. Then the 2 siblings' swords clash, and the boy despairs, thinking she is really going to take him down. A huge blast of energy erupts in the middle of the woods, powerfully destroying everything around it. With a smile on her face, the girl says his technique is still sharp, but she won't make it easy for him. But the boy struggles to block the blow as she complains that it doesn't even feel like a real sword. With that, he's thrown backward because he still can't control his magical power properly. The impact on the ground is so strong it makes the earth shake as the young man tries to recover from the hit. At that moment, the protagonist realizes his sister is still relentless and has no intention of stopping her attack. She stands there observing the damage, showing she has always been a very difficult person to deal with. Back then, the red-haired girl complained that he was the only male in the family with the right of succession. He felt special for having a superior ability, but this created a lot of jealousy among his siblings, so the girl would act like a storm, fighting over anything she considered unfair. With that, we return to the present, where their strikes create enormous craters in the forest floor. The hero's gaze becomes more focused, as he knows he needs to take this training very seriously. Their blades clash again, generating a giant blue light that illuminates the entire area around them. Shouting in anger, the young woman declares he's not fit to be the next leader of their noble house. Meanwhile, their other sister watches everything from a window, wondering if it was right to leave the two of them alone. She fears someone might get badly hurt in this silly fight, but their father seems quite calm. The Viscount explains that they are both good rivals, and that the situation won't go beyond a healthy competition. Though worried, the white-haired young woman hopes the patriarch is right about them. Soon after, she asks what the real reason was for them being called back from the military academy. At that instant, the man confirms the matter is serious and starts to fiddle with something stored in a drawer. The white-haired young woman is shocked to see what her father is holding and doesn't understand the situation. The Viscount then shows her the letter, revealing it's a summons from the main Elmheim family. He explains that the heads of the house want to meet the new relative they've taken in. With a hand on her chin, the girl understands this is a very serious and unexpected event. With this, their father becomes worried, saying that in the worst-case scenario, they could face problems. The older man fears the main family might end up taking the boy away from them. At that, the protagonist yells that he refused to be the successor, and the red-haired girl heard him loud and clear. But the girl angrily replies that's exactly what she dislikes about his attitude. The young man feels the weight of his sister's blow and can barely stay on his feet from the force of the attack. He compares her strength to that of a giant troll swinging a huge club without stopping. The red-haired girl concentrates all her energy into the gleaming blue blade to deliver a final blow. With a trembling hand, the black-haired boy tries to block the attack with his unstable sword. The two siblings are locked in a contest of strength, their swords clashing in mid-air. Then the protagonist tries to reason with her, asking his sister to stop and just listen to what he has to say. But she glares at him with a cold look and asks if he was trying to run from their fight. Without hesitation, the young woman unleashes a wave of power that forcefully sends her brother flying. Surprised, he can hardly believe the raw strength the girl used to attack him again. Next, a voice explains that one who only uses a sword is a third-rate warrior, and one who only masters magic is considered a second-rate fighter in combat. Finally, it's revealed that only those who master both can become a true first-rate warrior. The red-haired girl sighs, saying she's very disappointed with Aster's attitude in the fight. She then explains that the difference in the number of wings indicates someone's level of magical power. With 5 wings, the young woman claims to be 2 times weaker than the boy, who has 7 marks. But even with all that strength, the hero avoided a direct confrontation, preferring to focus only on swordsmanship. With a provoking smile, the girl asks if he really distrusts his own power that much. At that moment, the warrior questions if her brother is afraid of losing control like he did in the past. The boy is surprised and mentally wonders if he truly fears the power of the 7 wings. Looking at his sword, the protagonist realizes he was unconsciously limiting his magic. He then understands that the weapon's instability was happening because he was trying to suppress all that energy. With that, the red-haired girl charges forward, saying the young man possesses everything she ever dreamed of having. Gripping the sword's hilt, the girl says she won't tolerate his arrogance in wasting such a gift. Furious, she launches a devastating attack, telling the boy to hand all that power over to her. Seeing the blow approach, the hero firmly grips the hilt of his weapon, which still has no blade. The impact of the girl's attack hits his defense, creating a massive explosion of blue light in the air. Completely in shock, the young woman is stunned to see her ultimate attack easily repelled. With his eyes glowing, the boy smiles and thanks his sister for snapping him back to reality. Right after, he charges forward through the dust, even without having formed the energy blade. The red-haired girl tenses up, thinking his magic has run out, but quickly dismisses that absurd idea. Leaping through the air, the hero prepares to use all the magical power hidden within the 7 wings. Knowing he can't maintain the blade, the boy focuses his magic only for the exact moment of impact. Kudo smiles and praises her brother's idea, but calls him an idiot for taking so long to think of it. The boy smiles back, remembering he sees this second chance at life with all his might. With the crest glowing on his back, he swears he won't waste the power he has now received. He thinks of the family he never had and promises to protect them all, no matter the cost. The red-haired girl is confused by his sudden change in attitude and the determination in his eyes. Then the hero charges with full force, releasing a gigantic red aura that startles the girl. He swings his sword violently, creating a slash of energy that tears through the air toward her. The girl can barely react as she sees that overwhelming power coming right at her. Suddenly, the young man vanishes from her sight, leaving the warrior completely lost in the fight, and he appears right in front of her with his sword charged with magic, saying he won't hold back anymore. The young woman's eyes widen in pure terror as she realizes she won't be able to defend against it. With a battle cry, the protagonist brings his blade down with full force, creating an explosion. Suddenly, the girl wakes up startled in her bed, sweating coldly as if from a nightmare. Looking around, she sees the sunlight coming in and wonders if she's really in her room. Still a bit dizzy, she hears a familiar voice asking if Sleeping Beauty has finally awakened. Her white-haired sister opens the curtains and comments that the young woman slept for quite a long time. But the red-haired girl leaps up, desperately asking what happened in the fight against Aster. Smiling, the other one tells her that the boy himself carried her there after she passed out during training. He made up an excuse, saying his sister fell asleep from the exhaustion of the long journey. The warrior sits on the bed in disbelief, murmuring that the story makes no sense at all. In that final moment, the girl truly believed her brother was going to strike her down with his sword. But in reality, the young man made the magic blade disappear right before it could reach his sister's body. Only the residue of that energy passed by her, causing no real physical harm. Thinking about it calmly now, she knows the hero would never harm a member of his own family. The boy had always been very kind and playful, despite holding that immense power inside him. However, in that frightening moment, his threat seemed very real and dangerous. With a smile on her face, the red-haired girl admits he's a very vengeful and resentful little brother. At that moment, she gets the attention of her white-haired sister, who was near the window. She grips her weapon tightly and asks where the boy went, because she wants a rematch now. The warrior shouts that she doesn't accept that outcome and will fight with everything she's got this time. But the other one calmly replies that if she's looking for her brother, he has already left the mansion. Hearing that, the girl freezes, not understanding a word of what she just heard. Then the young woman explains that an urgent summons arrived for the young man from the main family, and she says he left a short while ago with their father to answer the noble call. The red-haired girl has a shocked expression, as no one had told her anything about this. In her mind, she wonders how something so important happened without her knowing beforehand. Meanwhile, we see a carriage traveling along the stone streets of the city. In the reflection of the glass, the protagonist watches the scenery outside with a very thoughtful look. The Viscount then explains that the people they are going to meet are the elders of the royal family. He reveals that even in retirement, these old men still control everything from the kingdom's shadows. It's revealed in this grim conversation that failures were cast out to the wolves. The Viscount breaks into a cold sweat and asks where his son heard such a macabre and old story. Smiling, the boy says he's already prepared to be dealt with or exiled if need be. The older man changes the subject, asking if it was right to leave without saying goodbye to his sisters. But the young man replies that it's all right and that he was already planning to leave as soon as they arrive. He thinks it's better to leave his red-haired sister in peace to grow, since she dislikes him so much. While holding his sword, the hero realizes that thanks to the duel, he has learned to control his power. Now the protagonist feels he can draw out even more strength from his 7 magical wings. The Viscount stares at him seriously as the young man decides he will survive on his own. This irritates the patriarch, who questions this arrogant attitude of wanting to act alone. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupts the conversation, startling the 2 travelers on the road. The boy's eyes widen as he notices something approaching quickly from outside, and to his surprise, his red-haired sister appears, knocking on the window of the moving carriage. The father is shocked to see his daughter hanging there and asks if she ran all the way here. Ignoring the danger, the young woman complains that it was very cruel of him to leave without a word. Once inside the vehicle, the warrior reveals that she found out about the elder's summons. She sits down next to him and says she perfectly understands the weight of this tense situation. With a sharp gaze, the red-haired girl states that this call demands their utmost caution. Her older sister warned her that there's a high chance the boy may never return from there. The young man tries to lighten the mood, but the girl points her finger and says she despises him, incredibly so. The girl lists the reasons for her hatred, saying he's a boy and has 7 special wings. Looking at the sky, she admits her brother is stronger than her, even though she's the older sister. The boy just listens as she complains that he acts like an adult despite being just a child, but the red herald changes her tone, stating that despite all that, he is a precious member of the family. Then she stands up and demands that the young man come back alive so they can have a rematch. With a smile on her face, the young woman warns that she'll never forgive him if he runs away with this victory. Right after, the warrior leaps from the moving carriage, leaving the 2 of them behind. The Viscount is left completely confused, and the hero wonders what the point of that visit was. But the protagonist gives a slight smile, mentally thanking her for her own crazy way of showing support. Seeing his sister wave in the distance, the boy promises himself that he will definitely return. A while later, they arrive at the gates and are received by the guards of the main family. The soldiers block the passage with spears and inform them that the elder is already waiting inside. The older man tries to pass, saying he knows the way, but is stopped by the guards. A knight explains that he received strict orders to escort the 2 of them to the location together. The atmosphere becomes heavy, and the golden-eyed young man notices something is wrong with this reception. At that, the adoptive father realizes the summons wasn't just to spoil a newfound grandson. Looking at the castle, the hero feels a sense of nostalgia, as it's been a long time since he's been home. Walking through the courtyard, the Viscount asks the young man to control his temper today. He warns that the boy must remain calm, no matter what they say or how they act there. The man seems tense and explains that the real problem is the person they are about to meet. As they walk, the hero notices that the young man named Darius isn't training in the courtyard with the others. His adoptive father gets his attention, asking if he's listening to their important conversation. With an awkward smile, the young man replies that he is, but his mind was elsewhere. Looking at the door, he promises to stay quiet and come back to his sister in one piece. At that moment, a giant gate slowly opens, revealing the interior of the main hall. As soon as they enter, a voice announces the arrival of Lord Hyfried and his son to everyone there. From the throne, a powerful voice echoes, saying the noble has finally appeared after 10 years. The white-bearded old man then calls out his grandson Hyfried's name in a deep tone. The Viscount kneels on the floor and respectfully greets the 6th head of the family, but he quickly corrects himself, calling him the Great Elder, showing the hierarchy of the noble place. The protagonist stares at the old man, thinking that he's the monster hiding in Elmheim's shadows. It is revealed that this man is Zenas, the 6th head of the main family and leader of the elders. The young man also notices the presence of other important figures of the clan observing the scene. He even recognizes some faces that were at the sword dance festival some time ago. However, the hero realizes that his rival, Roderick, is not among the nobles present in the hall. The elder seems to read his mind and confirms that the young warrior was not called to the meeting. It is explained that Roderick has become the leader of the knights, who serve the royalty directly. The old man says with disdain that the knight has no time to waste on such trivial and mundane matters. The hero thinks that in his past life, he never had the chance to see these people and didn't even care. But now he realizes that for a retired man, the elder still holds a lot of influence in the kingdom. Sweating nervously, the Viscount asks what these so-called mundane matters are about. With a laugh, the leader says the man has surely already guessed the real reason. The elder recalls that the noble's watchdog caused a disturbance at the last festival. With a serious look, the young man realizes the meeting is focused exactly on that old incident. His adoptive father argues that the current leader, Roderick, should have already handled this personally, but another figure replies that it was just a little show, and the clan's name was still tarnished. The leader states that adopting an orphan was a mistake, and now that he has growled at them, he must be exiled. Losing his patience, the protagonist stands up abruptly, taking the blame for that event. He then firmly states that his father has nothing to do with this whole story. However, the older man lowers his head, silently shaking it from side to side. Seeing his sad reaction, the hero becomes quite confused, not understanding what is happening. From high on his throne, the old man judges the rudeness of a child interfering in the conversation of adults. Flaunting his authority, the Lord boasts that they command 12,000 knights in this vast kingdom. This army carries the enormous weight of the clan, but the old man warns that the soldiers do not all think alike. Observing the room, he explains there are countless greedy people eyeing the house's ultimate power. He soon concludes that even within that very room, there are people after that leadership position. Tapping his cane on the floor, the leader demands just one guarantee of peace, so the clan will not be harmed. In that instant, a blade is pointed directly at the Viscount's neck, leaving him terrified. Holding the red weapon, the elder asks if he remembers when he failed to protect his master before. Finally, he cruelly recalls how Roderick struck down his arm right in the middle of that very hall. The fearsome-eyed elder orders the Viscount to remove his own son's head right there. At this, the boy is in shock upon hearing the cruel order and cannot believe what he just heard. But surprising everyone, the adoptive father refuses the order very firmly and courageously. The man swears he would rather take his own life before hurting his beloved son with a sword. With that, the leader calmly turns his back and just murmurs that he understands the Lord's decision. Then he bangs his heavy cane on the wooden floor, warning that he will now take a different course of action. With a wicked laugh, the old man condemns the Viscount's entire family to be eliminated today. In that instant, the knights advance, drawing their swords against the gray-haired man. The adoptive father can't defend himself properly and ends up cornered by the royal guards. Seeing the scene, the hero lowers his head and questions what that great elder is so afraid of. The leader is confused, while the young man finds it pathetic to see grown men trembling like that. Surrounded by blades, the boy tells them to exile him or do whatever they want if they're so scared. However, the young man warns in a dark tone that no one there should lay a finger on his beloved family. The Lord looks at the hero in surprise and notices the dangerous aura beginning to emerge in the hall. Then the protagonist apologizes to his father, stating he can't stay silent watching this. The armed knights begin to sweat coldly in retreat, terrified by what they just witnessed. The magical crest glows on the boy's back, revealing an immense power that shocks everyone in the room. An intense red energy fills the place, proving the frightening strength of his 7 wings. With his golden eyes glowing, the hero tells the old men to think very carefully about their next move. The seated nobles are completely paralyzed and can hardly believe the boy's legendary mark. Even knowing what it is, the elder questions if the mark on the hero's back isn't just a fake. Another noble agrees, saying this kind of thing hasn't appeared on a human in many hundreds of years. On the contrary, a mustached lord disagrees with them, as it's impossible for that to be a false symbol. From his throne, with a surprised look, the leader gets the hero's attention, whispering the word, "boy." With a confident smile, the black-haired young man says he knows this number drives people mad, but a guard approaches from behind him, spear in hand, asking if he understands the weight of this. Thus, the situation grows tense, as his bold move of showing this mark is not well received here. With a relaxed tone, the old man with the ponytail apologizes for the interruption and tells him to continue. In his explanation, he says the crest is a power, generating core granted by the gods in the past. And through the ages, this power was passed down through the bloodline of a single descendant. And over many generations, people continued to refine and greatly strengthen that magic. However, the formidable power of 7 wings has never been achieved by anyone in the nation's entire history. Only the ancestors of the spirit clan who created that magical core could achieve such a rare feat. At that moment, the golden-eyed hero refutes the rumors, asking if the old men are saying he's from that bloodline. Surprising both him and his father, the mysterious man in the cloak does not deny the words the young man had just spoken. Even with swords near his neck, the Lord grows even more tense upon hearing that shocking and bizarre revelation. The boy resumes his arrogant posture, walking over to where his own warm shirt had fallen on the floor, and stepping on it. He warns that his birth means absolutely nothing, as he only wants to know if they are his enemies. The hero's adoptive father is greatly alarmed by the bold question his son had just asked the lords. In his mind, he recalls the man's words that the clan was divided and, if they were lucky, they would avoid the imminent rebellion. In that moment, the hero thinks that he has already seen this future and needs to find out who here is an ally or an enemy. Laughing loudly, the old man questions if the boy really thinks he's worth all this effort and trouble. Then the bearded leader states that they have no real proof that the mark is genuine. With a challenging smile, the young man says that if they think it's a lie, they can try to take him down right now. Staring at the Lord, the young man warns that the moment they do, a war will begin between them. At that, a blue-haired noble joins the conversation, asking if the others don't want to see that power. He suggests calmly that the council could very well decide the young man's fate after that. Being very diplomatic, the man suggests the clan use one of this place's tests against the intruder. In that instant, the protagonist notices the elegant man's attitude and understands his plan. The hero then concludes that the blue-haired lord is definitely an ally in the middle of that room. Tapping his cane on the floor, the great elder lets out a dry laugh and tells everyone to follow him through the castle. Walking ahead, the leader grumbles that it is a grandfather's duty to discipline such an ill-mannered grandson. They then arrive at a dark grate, and the boy observes the very deep hole with curiosity. Looking down the giant pit, it's revealed to be an old underground shelter for the royal family. But the old man explains that they now keep a magical beast there, and the test is simply to defeat the monster. Worried, the adoptive father sighs, saying his son is very troublesome for revealing the secret. But the young man opens the gate with a smile, replying that he couldn't hide such a large mark forever. With a serious look, the gray-haired lord asks his beloved boy not to let his guard down in there. Without hesitation, the young man firmly grabs the iron chain and announces he's going to face the great challenge. Sliding into the darkness, the warrior's eye gleams, showing he's ready for battle. With a calm smile, the blue-haired noble observes everything, seeming to be a very valuable ally. With that, the boy walks across the dam floor, noticing the place is truly very dark and quiet. But his yellow eyes glow in the darkness, allowing the hero to see everything around him clearly. Suddenly, he's startled as he feels an overwhelming presence coming straight from the shadows of the prison. Meanwhile, from above, the elder explains that he even gave the other failure a chance to redeem himself. Then the old man recounts that the previous young man did nothing cry and scream in fear until his end. Soon, the monster appears, growling and with a very hungry look in the middle of the darkness. But the protagonist is not intimidated and draws his weapon, ready to show the true power of the 7 wings. With a deafening roar, the combat begins, and the young warrior faces the danger without any fear. The young man thinks about being born into a house full of monsters, as he sees a fallen arm on the dark ground. Then, the giant white creature roars fiercely in our hero's direction. The The boy nimbly dodges the beast's attack while preparing a swift counter-attack. With that, he dashes past the monster, slicing through the air with his sword at high speed. Watching from above, the nobles are completely shocked by the young man's skill, but the protagonist scoffs, saying his sister Kudo is much scarier than this. The beast then glares at him, and a purple aura starts to emanate from its entire body. At that moment, the young man realizes something is wrong with the creature in the pit. Purple tentacles emerge from the monster's body, and he understands that this isn't normal. Wide-eyed, the hero finally discovers he's fighting an undead creature. Up above, his adoptive father despairs, asking why something like this is under the mansion. The elder explains that these beings are drawn to the scent of demise and seek fresh bodies. He continues, saying the creature wouldn't go down no matter what, so they captured it. The leader also reveals that thanks to this, they no longer need to dispose of the remains. Then, a mustached noble comments that even skilled knights can barely capture them. He questions if they plan to let the seven-winged boy fall in vain. The old leader replies that if that happens, it will only prove the boy was an imposter. Besides, a powerless wing crest isn't even useful as a decoration. With a cold smile, he states that even if the boy perishes, there's still a use for him. The blue-haired noble just watches the scene with a serious expression on his face. In his thoughts, he worries about the young man's fate after so much talk. He then mentally pleads for Aster not to fall as the boy attacks the beast. However, the hero notices that no matter how many times he cuts, there's no real effect. He notes that compared to a normal undead, this one's regeneration is insane. At that, the young man remembers a crucial fact. The undead are already without life. To defeat them completely, you have to burn them in sunlight or purify them. Without either of those options, the standard tactic against the undead is simply not to fight. But the protagonist knows that retreating isn't an option, and basic tactics are useless here. With a determined look, he grips his sword, as he needs to prove his worth. He then decides he will defeat the undead with his brute force alone, and charges forward. Up above, one of the nobles is thrown back by the shockwave, stunned by so much power. The other men shout, wondering what's happening, and if the boy defeated the creature. But the great elder just watches everything with a calm and thoughtful gaze from above. As the dust settles, the protagonist emerges in the middle of the arena, holding his sword. With a serious expression, the clan leader just mutters that all of that was a waste. Suddenly, the hero is sent flying by a surprise attack coming from the smoke. With the impact, he hits the wall hard, feeling a sharp pain in his back. Then, the immortal beast appears again and stumps on the boy with its giant paw on the ground. Seeing the desperate scene, the adoptive father screams Aster's name with all his might. At that moment, the blue-haired noble stops him and tells him not to ruin everything by jumping in to save him. The gray-haired man gets angry and asks if they just want to stand by and watch his son. With a smile, the elegant young man asks him to calm down and tells the lord to just watch the fight. He keeps smiling and asks the man to just look at what's about to happen down there. The allied noble reveals that the boy still seems to have a card up his sleeve to use against the monster. Meanwhile, the fallen hero notices that the creature seems to be a little thinner than before. With that, he gets up and focuses all his red energy into the blade of his sword. Then the young man charges forward with everything he has and shoves his glowing weapon into the giant monster's mouth. With a battle cry, the protagonist swears he'll keep attacking until the enemy vanishes. He unleashes a series of fast and powerful slashes that hit the beast head on. The boy's father recognizes the move as one he himself once taught the young man. But he soon realizes it's something totally different when black and red energy explodes. The power is so immense that one of the nobles yells a warning that the entire place is going to collapse. The elder then orders the other lords to follow him to get out of there as quickly as possible. With his glowing red eyes, the leader observes the destruction caused by the boy's power. Surrounded by a red whirlwind, the hero finally unleashes the true power of his 7 wings. When the dust settles, the chubby noble asks what happened, and if everything has calmed down. Everyone looks at the now empty pit and wonders where the magical beast went. The old leader then explains that the boy dragged the undead creature into a vortex of magic. Inside that vortex, the creature that wouldn't go down easily was completely turned to dust. He concludes that it wasn't technique but raw power, a feat that only the 7 wings could accomplish. The elder asks the Viscount if that was his doing, but the man immediately denies the accusation. With that, the adoptive father admits to being just as shocked as the others by his son's growth. Then the blue-haired noble turns to the elders and asks if the boy passed the test. With his eyes shining, the leader states that he doubts anyone there will oppose his approval. At that, the alley shouts down to Aster, letting him know that he passed and can come up now. The boy at the bottom of the pit then mentions that the chain he used to get down was destroyed. With a smile, he explains that the chain was caught in the vortex and asks for a rope to climb up. Later in a room, the elder asks the young man if this is what he really wants. The boy confirms, saying he has no interest in the succession, as his cousins wouldn't be at peace. He states that his place is in the Viscount's house, while the old leader doubts his words. The elder says he's not fooled by the ambition he clearly sees in the hero's eyes. He then accuses him of intending to turn his blade against the kingdom of Elmheim itself someday. At that moment, the old man questions if the boy's real target is Roderick's head. With a laugh, the leader tells the young man not to be tense, as he won't investigate it for now. Confused, the boy asks why, since the rebels should be enemies of the royal house. The elder then reminds the boy that not everyone within the nobility thinks the same way. He reveals that Roderick has a will that is too strong for his taste as an aura appears. His existence can keep Roderick in check, but the old man warns him not to show his teeth to him again. Leaving the room, the protagonist grumbles about the conversation he had with that old monster. His father is waiting for him and asks what they said, and he reveals that he refused to join the main house. The gray-haired man is completely shocked to hear his son's decision. The blue-haired noble appears, saying the young man's refusal is a real shame. He explains that life would be more privileged, and the hero recognizes him as Count Maze. The boy asks why he suggested something that helped him, and the Count just gives a wink. The noble says he just felt like teasing an arrogant and annoying child like him. He then puts a hand on the boy's shoulder and says that he has now been recognized as the 7-winged boy. With a serious look, the Count tells the young man to look around the hall very carefully. Other nobles watch them with greedy eyes, as some want to eliminate him or use him for their own plans. The ally explains that the crest has enormous value and that more people will come after him in various ways. The protagonist then faces the Count and asks if he is one of those interested people. The Count looks at the young man with a calm expression, showing no immediate reaction. He then reveals that he's on the council of the Knight Academy, and his job is to recruit young talent. At that, the noble points to the man with the mustache and says the same goes for that gentleman. Bidding farewell, he says he eagerly awaits the day the hero enrolls in the academy. The protagonist finds the Count hard to read and concludes it's too early to decide if he's an ally. Next, his father calls him, saying they should also head home after everything. With a proud smile, he says the boy's sisters need to hear about his great performance. The young man laughs and says that when his mother sees his injuries, she'll faint on the spot. Elsewhere, a knight reports that the young Master Darius passed away in a test given by Lord Zenith. His superior listens intently and also learns that Hyfried's son was summoned by the elders. The guard then offers to give a full report on what happened at that meeting, but the blonde-haired man already crosses his fingers and confirms that the boy really does have 7 wings. Surprised, the knight asks how his master already knew about such an important detail. Holding a scale, the powerful man states that this could upset the balance of power in Elmheim. The knight then asks if they should take any action against the boy. However, his superior tells him to leave things as they are for now and do nothing. Sitting on his throne, he says that if the kingdom could be shaken so easily, it would have fallen long ago. Besides, he claims that sooner or later, the 7 wings will be his anyway. He decides then to watch the boy he failed to capture in the past and see him have a little fun. We see a man with an eye patch standing over a person fallen in the snow in a past scene. The man with one eye and a fierce gaze is called Ash, the child of the 7 wings. 4 years later, candidates line up for the Night Academy's entrance exam. One of the staff members yells for the candidates to hurry up after they finish their registration. In the middle of the crowd, someone asks if a certain boy in line is the one from the rumors. A man with a mocking smile says it can't be because he heard the guy was much stronger. A waiver is presented for the candidates to sign, releasing the kingdom from any and all liability. An examiner then asks the next in line to show his wing crest to confirm his magic. He then calls the candidate's name, which is Aster F. Elmham, surprising everyone around. The man's eyes go wide upon hearing the surname Elmheim, and he realizes who he's talking to. Now older, the protagonist turns and says his crest is in a bit of a strange place. With a sly smile, the young man pulls up his shirt and asks if he can't just pass for being handsome. Outside, we see the Grand Night Academy, with many candidates waiting in the courtyard. As he walks alone, one of the other candidates calls out to our hero in the middle of the crowd. The brown-haired boy calls him a show-off, and the protagonist just gives him a bored look. He introduces himself as Bigger Smide and calls him a country noble, doubting he's in the right place. Bigger then points to the emblem and explains that this is the elite exam for the royal cadets. The black-haired young man just replies that there's no problem and keeps walking, leaving Bigger shocked. The bully tries to stop him, explaining that everyone there trained hard and keeps coming back for the exam. At that, he points to the hero's small sword and says this is no place for newbies like him. With a wave of his hand, the guy tells the protagonist to get out of there and stop staring. Watching the scene, 2 other candidates comment that Smythe is picking on the newbies again, but one of them recognizes the boy as the one from Elmheim everyone was gossiping about. The hero smiles upon hearing one of them call him Aster of the 7 wings, surprising the bully. At that moment, an orange-haired boy approaches and reveals himself as our protagonist's cousin. The golden-eyed young man stares at him with a cold and serious expression on his face. Named Gryan, the cousin greets him with a smile, saying it's been a long time since they've seen each other. The hero apologizes for Darius, but Gryan says it was a relief, as he deserved it. He reveals that Darius was a nuisance for thinking he was superior, just for being 1 year older. Gryan then warns his cousin not to underestimate the members of the main house, even with 7 wings. With a menacing smile, he says that here, the boy won't have anyone to protect him like before. One of the candidates watches the 2 and comments that it's going to be a tough year for the others with 2 Elmheims in the exam. Smythe gets worried, knowing that the main and branch houses hate each other, and he doesn't want to get involved. Stuttering, the bully approaches the hero and asks if he happens to be an Elmheim. The protagonist just stares at him with a serious expression, not answering the boy's question. Then, the black-haired young man flashes a gentle smile at the upperclassman who was bothering him. He tells the boy to simply call him Aster and treats him as a senior from the academy. In the first exam room, an instructor thanks everyone for coming and praises their courage. He continues his speech, saying that the royal knights are not like the ones from the countryside. With a clenched fist, the man shouts that they serve and protect the king above all else. He finishes by saying they are proud blades and have no use for weak or slow swords. The instructor concludes by telling the candidates to treat today's exam as a battlefield. With a smile, the hero thinks it's all a bunch of nonsense, but is happy to finally be back here. He remembers that when he had no wings, he couldn't even dream of becoming a royal knight. In his mind, he pictures a world of warriors he could never reach, with that man at the top. This man is Roderick A. Elmheim, the supreme commander of all the kingdom's royal knights. Surrounded by warriors, the young man promises in his thoughts that he will wait for Roderick at the top. With a determined look, he vows that he will reach him very soon, no matter what. But to achieve his goal, he first needs to pass this selection exam. The instructor then shouts that the exam is beginning, and dozens of arrows are launched from above. The first test is revealed, and an arrow hits a distracted candidate square in the chest. As the body falls, the test is announced as the trial of arrows. To everyone's surprise, the rule is simple, and those who remain standing at the end will be the great victors of the trial. Many candidates are hit and scream in panic, not knowing what to do with so many arrows. More candidates fall one after another as the arrows keep coming from all directions. Seeing the danger, some join together and shout for the others to group up to block the arrows together. Watching from above, the instructor comments that the test veterans already know how to act in this situation, but he reveals with a serious look that the survival rate is only 30%. The man continues his analysis and says that relying on mere tricks like this has its limits. He explains that they want to see incredible solutions only from those who possess wing crests. In the midst of all the chaos, the protagonist stands alone, surrounded by bodies and arrows. One of the candidates sees him and wonders why that idiot is just standing there in the middle of danger. With a malicious smile, his cousin Brian scoffs and tells him to become a target and perish already. But the black-haired young man just unsheathes his sword with impressive calmness. Then he raises his blade, which easily deflects the weapons that came his way. The other candidates look at him, completely shocked by the scene they are witnessing. With a single movement, he dodges all the arrows coming at him at the same time. With a confident smile on his face, the hero challenges the test and tells them to bring on all the arrows. He continues to spin his sword, creating a red whirlwind that repels all the projectiles. His cousin Gran's jaw drops as he wonders what kind of monster he really is. The boy can't believe that not even a single arrow managed to get close to him. The instructor smiles, impressed, and realizes he's rotating his magic to create an air current. He is amazed by the young man's incredible control of magic, as if he were wrapped in a storm. Suddenly, everything stops, and one of the candidates asks if the test is finally over. The man in charge of the trial notes that more people survive than expected, but doesn't care. He congratulates the survivors and tells them to look at the fallen, as those standing have passed the first phase. Brian and others who passed look around in relief, but the instructor warns that there's no time to rest. Then he yells for everyone to follow him to the location of the next test, at the Night Academy. Bigger Smythe grumbles, calling the instructor a demon for not giving them even a minute of rest. With a smile, the hero asks if the senior is already tired after a simple rain of arrows. The brown-haired boy is shocked and asks how the protagonist is so fine, as if nothing happened. From a distance, the instructor observes the boy and is impressed that he doesn't seem tired at all. He concludes that now he wants to see how the famous Aster of the Seven Wings really fights on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Brian walks with his group, and one of his companions gets his attention. Someone reminds him that he needs to stop his cousin from becoming a royal knight at all costs. With a determined look, the orange-haired young man vows he will do it for the future of all Elmheims. Elsewhere, an instructor announces that to be fair, everyone will use identical swords in the next exam. He explains that everyone must exchange their weapons for standard issue swords for the next phase of the test. Smythe complains about the rule, but for middle-class knights like them, the swords aren't that different. A colleague of his then whispers that they're actually eyeing the protagonist's strange sword. The black-haired young man hands over his sword and receives a standard one in return without complaining about the decision. Upon arriving at the site of the next test, Brian mocks his cousin for already having found a follower. Bigger gets annoyed and asks who he's calling a follower with an angry expression. The orange-haired boy recognizes him as the heir to the house of Baron Smythe, a country noble. The bully is left speechless when Brian warns him that following the wrong person could lead to trouble. But the hero interrupts and tells his cousin not to mind him, as it has nothing to do with him. He smiles in a somewhat suspicious way, and his cousin looks at him with a doubtful expression. The protagonist then realizes that the vibe around him is not good at all, with so many hostile glares. The instructor arrives and shouts that he will explain the rules of the second exam to all the candidates. He reveals that the next phase will be a battle for territory, and the candidates will be divided into 3 teams. Each base will have a flag, and the objective is to capture the enemy bases within the forest. The instructor announces that he will reveal the teams for the next battle, holding up colored ribbons. With that, the teams are formed, and Grian is on the yellow team, while another boy grabs the green flag. The protagonist and his new colleague Smythe end up together on the blue team, to the surprise of both. Seeing a signal flare in the sky, the black-haired young man announces that the exam has finally begun. He explains that each camp has 3 flags, and to win, a team must control 2 bases. At that, Smythe realizes that only one team can pass and asks if something is bothering the hero. A candidate complains that they'll have to fight against the Elmheims, and he's not happy about it at all. The golden-eyed boy is a bit confused by his teammates' reaction. Afraid, Smythe then explains that they are terrified of the situation they're in now. He reveals that everyone there has a great fear of the powerful Elmheim family's revenge. His colleague continues, saying that Grian is a rich and important boy from the main house of the nobility. Pointing a sword at him could end a knight's career, or even his family. Aster then questions if they're going to give up, and Smythe says there's always a next time to try. With a sad smile, the boy states that the protagonist would never understand how the weak feel. The hero thinks that he never imagined being isolated in a team exam, but can't blame them. He remembers that the Elmheims have always been tyrants, and Grian is the symbol of that fear for the others. Smythe repeats with a resigned look that the black-haired young man doesn't understand how they feel. With an ironic smile, Aster thinks that to the others, he is one of them too, and springs into action. Running alone through the forest, he finds it all very quiet and wonders if the fight hasn't started yet. He then stops upon sensing a strange presence and questions if everyone is just being cautious. A voice surprises him, and a blonde-haired boy says he didn't expect him to come there alone. Near the flagpole, the young man with glasses comments that things are going just as he predicted. The hero is confused by the boy's words and asks who exactly he is talking about. With a smile, the blonde boy holds up his team's yellow flag and says he was suddenly set free. He then throws the flag to Aster and asks the black-haired young man to entertain him. The protagonist is surprised and somewhat confused by the other candidate's unexpected action. In place of the yellow flag is now a red one, and the blonde boy wonders what's going on. Other candidates also look at the sky, not understanding the flag swap on the pole at all. Suddenly, Grian's team appears, and he says he will show them what it means to fight like an Elmium. With that, the second exam kicks off, and the battle for territory starts with a bang. 20 candidates are split into 3 teams, and the winner will be the one who controls 2 bases. The protagonist understands that planting his flag at the enemy base is the only way to pass. So he confronts the blonde guy and asks him why he's on the yellow team for the exam. The hero asks why he's holding the enemy team's red flag. The blue-eyed guy reveals that he's formed an alliance with the Elmheims, leaving Aster shocked. Watching from a distance, one of the instructors reveals that the blonde guy is Christopher Nolan, a master swordsman. He says that in the first exam, only the protagonist and Nolan passed the arrow test unharmed. As the two face off, the man comments that the problem is that they are both excellent candidates. He then concludes that only one of them can pass, which means a certain elimination. In the middle of the fight, the black-haired boy wonders about the alliance between the teams. He reminds his opponent that even with a deal, only one team can be the ultimate winner. Nolan smiles and says that's why the main house will win, as his allies attack the hero's base. At that moment, the boy realizes that Smythe and his other teammates are in danger from the invasion. With a serious look, he wonders if Grian threatened them with the power of the Elmheim name. The blonde opponent replies that no one is foolish enough to stand in the way of a carriage. He continues, explaining that noble knights live in a very strict and severe hierarchy. With a powerful strike, the guy declares that this is how high-born nobles are supposed to act. The protagonist blocks the attack and notices his sword is cracking and seems strange. He remembers the instructor and understands that he was given a low-quality sword on purpose. Nolan reveals that he never liked the Elmheims and that now the fight is just between the two of them. He adds that he especially hates show-offs like the seven-winged boy. Then, Nolan's sword lunges forward and shatters the hero's faulty blade into pieces. With the broken weapon in his hand, the young man with black hair faces the situation seriously. Suddenly, he throws what's left of his sword toward his opponent as a distraction. The guy is surprised by the unexpected move and defends himself from the hero's surprise attack. While his enemy is distracted, the protagonist takes the chance to run and get away from the fight. He yells that he'll deal with the blonde guy later, because he has someone else to settle the score with first. The blonde-haired guy scoffs, thinking the hero is scared and not a real knight. But the black-haired young man stops running when he sees something shining on the ground right in front of him. He picks up the piece of the weapon and comments on how low quality it is, even for a cheap one. Nolan watches the scene and realizes it was a pathetic trick by the Elmheim family. Arriving at his camp, the hero shouts for Smythe, but his cousin is already waiting for him. With a mocking smile, Brian says that Nolan couldn't even slow the black-haired boy down. The cousin continues to taunt him, saying he was looking forward to seeing him handle everything alone. He then reveals that they just took over the third base and are close to total control. With a furious look, the protagonist stares at his cousin without saying a single word. The hero then asks what happened to his teammates who were at the base. Brian just watches him with a serious and somewhat sinister expression on his face. Suddenly, a blade is pointed at the back of the seven-winged young man unexpectedly. The one attacking him is Smythe, who tells him not to take it personally, as he warned he wouldn't get involved. With a nervous expression, the guy states that only fools would dare to challenge the Elmheim family. The orange-haired cousin laughs and comments that Astor's teammates didn't even try to resist the attack. Smythe says that even nobles from the countryside know which side to choose, and the hero questions him about the numbers. Brian corrects him with a smile and says that he's wrong, because the victory is already theirs. The condition to win the territory battle is to hold at least 2 bases until the end. The cousin explains that even if the boy fights like crazy and plants flags everywhere, he won't have anyone to guard the flags since all his allies have turned on him. Their plan is simple: wait for the hero to leave for another base, and then retake the old one. With a victorious smile, Grayan states that as long as they hold 2 bases, victory is guaranteed. The protagonist then replies that he'll make sure they can't carry out that plan. With a look full of hatred, he vows that he will take down every single one of them by himself if he has to. Smythe and the other traders are completely terrified by the black-haired young man's threat, but the orange-haired cousin just smiles and says the protagonist is only bluffing. He reminds him that his sword was useless, and without a weapon, he's nothing more than one of the wingless. With an air of superiority, he asks if the boy is really going to try and face everyone there. The hero then raises the broken hilt of his sword and admits that his cousin got him. With a smile, he says he's impressed with Brian's plan and his strategy. Smythe is completely confused by the calm reaction of the black-haired young man in front of him. The protagonist continues with his praise, admitting the plan was much better than he expected. Brian, with a triumphant look, then shouts for everyone to hear that he has won the battle. The hilt of the broken sword falls to the ground as the cousin celebrates his early victory, but the protagonist just stares back at him with a mysterious and confident look in his eyes.